Welcome back, accomplices. You heard that right. We are back and not going anywhere for a while.
We have missed being here and are so excited to be back in the studio.
We aren't going to bore you with an excuse as to why we have been gone so long. All you need to know is we are back doing what we love.
But first, an update. Taylor Shabusiness attacked her lawyer in court on Friday.
No, that doesn't sound like her.
Yeah, she would never do that.
Ever. As you know, Shabusiness is serving a life sentence for killing and dismembering her ex-lover, Shad Therian, during a drug-fueled sexual encounter.
If you listen to the Christmas special or just keep on...
Keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on. If you listen to the Christmas special or just keep up on the case naturally, you also know that in December of 2024, she allegedly attacked a prison employee where she is being held. But we all know she did it.
Attacking people isn't her motive. I don't think it's her.
Not at all.
She's innocent, I tell you. In court on April 4th, as the attorneys entered their appearances, Shabusiness leapt up from her seat and began yelling as she lunged toward her attorney, Curtis Jolka. The guards who had been standing near her immediately tackled her to the ground and removed her from the courtroom. A short time later, appearing on a screen in the courtroom, Shabusiness's brow was furrowed and her arms appeared to be restrained to the chair in which she was sitting. Judge Nels found probable cause for the case to move forward to trial. Shabusiness pleaded not guilty and, following the hearing, was assigned to a new attorney.
Man, she's becoming a real Sarah Boone.
That she is. We will update more as they come along. For now, Tara has a case to present, and I hear it's a juicy one.
It definitely is. So if you guys remember back to season 2, episode 2, I believe it was the Syracuse Dungeon Master. I had mentioned that he had a muse. And so the case that I'm doing today is that muse. So this is what I like to call hippie pornographer turned serial killer.
Ooh, question.
Yes.
When you say hippie pornographer, was it because he himself was a hippie or he only shot hippie porn?
Kind of, and no. But those
will we find out?
Yes, your questions will be answered. On June 2nd, 1985, Charles Ng was arrested in a San Francisco hardware store for attempting to steal a vice. Generally, this would have been an ordinary arrest. However, the officers at the scene ended up getting more than they could have ever bargained for. An officer took Ng into custody. A friend of his turned up to pay for the vice. The man was none other than Leonard Lake. Police soon found out shoplifting was the least of his crimes. The ensuing investigation unearthed the gruesome fact that Lake, along with his accomplice, had been quietly and horrifically torturing roughly 25 people in a remote cabin located in Calaveras County for the last 2 years. And that was only the beginning. So let's hop in the DeLorean and travel back to 1971, long before Leonard Lake ever met Charles Ng. Lake was in a dark state of mind. He'd just been medically discharged from the United States Marine Corps following 2 tours of duty in the Vietnam War. During his last tour, he'd suffered a mental breakdown and later was diagnosed with a schizoid personality disorder, or SZPD. This is just a mental health condition characterized by a pervasive pattern of detachment from social relationships and a restricted range of emotional expression. depression. Some symptoms of SZPD that are relevant to this case include, but are not limited to, a lack of interest in close relationships, emotional closeness or detachment, inability to express emotions or show empathy, and the indifference to praise or criticism. Of course, Lake had been showing signs of this disorder for years. It was just the first time anyone had gotten close enough to him to diagnose it. Ever since Lake was a boy, everyone who met him knew there was something off about him. Born in 1945, Leonard Lake was often referred to as a bright child, although bright was the extent of the praise. After his parents divorced when he was 6 years old, he and his siblings moved in with his grandmother, who would be the source of support for the children during their parents' separation. And it seemed that she may have also been the catalyst for Lake's depraved personality. When Lake was found forcing his sister to pose nude for photographs, his grandmother looked the other way. When he became obsessed with pornography and started extorting his sisters to perform sexual acts, good old grandma didn't lift a finger. When Lake was found killing mice and other small animals, then dissolving them in acid, she again did nothing. In some accounts, Lake's grandmother even encouraged his nude photography. It would seem... I know. Why is there always like a mother figure behind every just fucked up... Yeah, I don't get it.
Gross.
Yeah. This is how you make serial killers. Do something about it. So it would seem that the lack of structure or punishment for such acts left Lake with an open door and nothing to curb his psychotic instincts that would evolve into his future acts of horror. It always sounds like I say horror, but it's horror. Horror. So following his graduation from Balboa High School in San Francisco in 1964, Leonard Lake enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps. Of course, as we already know, how his 2 active duty tours in Vietnam ended following what Army medical techs deemed as quote-unquote delusional breakdown. Lake was discharged and sent home. Around this time, Lake discovered a hippie commune just outside of San Francisco and dropped out of college after 1 semester at San Jose State University to embrace the blossoming free love lifestyle that was slowly taking over the American West Coast. By 1975, it seemed that Leonard Lake had overcome his disturbing phase. He settled down in the commune with a wife he'd met there, but before long, the woman he'd married found out about his sordid interests. After discovering that Lake was making and appearing in homemade amateur BDSM porn, BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, or domination, sadism, and masochism, and it involves various expressions of power, control, and sensations, which some may refer to as a kink. Not bashing anybody with that sort of kink, just telling the facts here. Because of this, Leonard's marriage and life at the commune came to an end. Lake spent a brief stint in prison in 1980 after stealing a car. Despite these setbacks, Lake managed to move into Greenfield Ranch, another hippie settlement in Northern California that focused on living off the land. It was there that he met and married a woman named Carolyn Ballot. I'm not sure how to say her last name. It's Balazz, affectionately known as Cricket. Side note, Lake met Cricket while working at a Renaissance fair. I don't know why I felt that was important, but that's where he met her.
It's like a little fun fact.
So Cricket was everything Lake's first wife wasn't, particularly where it concerned Lake's private interests. While his first wife divorced him for his pornographic hobbies, Cricket accepted them and even offered to star in Lake's amateur films herself. He's got another supporting woman in his life.
Strong female characters.
Lake lived on the ranch with his wife and continued feeding his deep, dark desires. After a while, it appeared that these amateur home videos were no longer enough to satisfy those desires, and by 1983, Lake began to seek out and act on yet more sadistic fantasies.
His porn was his gateway drug.
Yes. So whether driven by his schizoid personality disorder or simply the constant mounting paranoia most Americans experienced concerning nuclear war at the time, Leonard Lake began to believe that the world was facing an impending nuclear holocaust. In order to survive this kind of disaster, Lake conceived a plan and built a survivalist bunker. Unfortunately for Lake, the owner of Greenfield Ranch halted these plans and forced Lake to take them elsewhere. To Lake's delight, he discovered that his wife's family owned a cabin in the woods, which they were more than happy to rent to him. Recovered from one of his diary entries was his sinister plot titled Operation Miranda, during which he would, quote unquote, restart in Humboldt County and turn his bunker, into his own words, a, quote, physical setting for my sexual fantasies, security for myself and my possessions, and limited protection from nuclear fallout. It is also believed that shortly after moving into the cabin, Lake invited his younger brother Donald and friend/best man at his wedding, Charles Gunner, to the cabin. Whether they entered his dungeon willingly is anyone's guess. It is clear, though, that they had been killed there. After their deaths, Lake stole any cash they had on them as well as their identification and began to pose as Charles Gunner. These deaths
That was his best friend and his brother. He just killed them for some cash. All right. What a dude.
These deaths hardly quelled Lake's desires. In 1981, he posed as what the fuck?
Posted.
Thank you. I'm like, he posed as an ad.
He posed as an ad.
In 1981, he posed as an ad in War Gamers magazine.
You said posed as an ad.
I'm sorry.
Posted an
ad. Okay. Shayna, take it away.
In 1981, he posted an ad in War Games magazine, presumably looking for another victim.
But what he got instead was an accomplice.
Accomplices! What?
Okay, so enter Charles Ng to the scene. Charles Ng was incredibly and disastrously similar to Leonard Lake, though 15 years...
Ooh, that's a good combination.
Yeah, that's how all best friends start, right?
They start with hating each other and then become best friends. And do karate in the garage.
And there's so much room for activities.
So much.
Boats and hoes.
There's blood everywhere.
Catalina wine mixer.
It's the fucking Catalina wine mixer.
All right, we are not an ad for Step Brothers, but that's a great movie. If you've never watched it, you should watch it. That's all I'm saying.
Please watch it.
Please go watch it. So, although Ng was 15 years Lake's junior, he had followed an almost identical life path. As a child, Ng had developed a serious case of kleptomania, becoming well known in his Hong Kong hometown for his sticky fingers. Following his expulsion from the British boarding school, from stealing from his fellow students, he attempted to continue his education at the College of Notre Dame in California. Again, similar to Lake's past, Ng only lasted one semester. After being involved in a hit-and-run accident, he joined the Marine Corps to avoid prosecution. Unfortunately, his manic tendencies were no match for the Marines, and he was dishonorably discharged in 1984 for desertion. Whether Lake intended for Ng to be his next victim or not, he saw the same psychotic tendencies in the young man as he had himself. Lake invited Ng to live in the cabin in the woods. This union proved to be a match made in hell. Over the next year, Lake invited Charles Ng into his dark world of torture and murder. The two began concocting their insidious scheme, and the duo chronicled everything from their victims' torture to the very motivation behind the villainous plot. So I have a little disclaimer here. There will be several audio clips played throughout the remainder of this recording. Some are quite disturbing to listen to. In this first clip that I'm going to play for you, you can just hear the I don't give a fuck in Leonard Lake's voice as he describes what he wants with his victims.
What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired or bored or not interested, I simply want to put her away, lock her up in a little room, get her out of my sight, out of my life. It's a slave. There's no way around it. Primarily a sexual slave, but nonetheless a physical slave as well. I believe that I can construct a holding style, a place where I can put such a woman, a facility that is so stark, so empty, so cold, so quiet, so totally removed from the world, that I can quickly condition a young woman to cooperate with me fully.
Creepy, huh? Yeah,
What
I
a
know.
gentleman.
So the two men construct.
Also,
Go ahead.
sorry. Didn't what was it the toy box killer played a video to like brainwash the victims too?
Yeah. So he would play brainwashing victims,
saying like
yeah,
similar
and
shit.
then there was also a so this wasn't for the victims. This was just like when they were plotting and everything, and then they did end up recording. Yeah,
but
yeah.
like,
So the toy box killer, which
the video that they played was like similar shit. Like, oh, a woman should only be used for sex or something like that, or to please the man.
Yeah. One of these days I'm going to cover Toy Box Killer because he's, I don't know, I'm just absolutely enthralled with that one. It sounds fucked up to say, but, you know, yeah.
He's your guy.
We all have our favorites.
Yeah. My favorite's Ed Kemper.
Okay.
Your favorite's Toy Box Killer.
I'm so fucked up. I'm fucked up. It's because it's what we here at Thick Lies and Murder Vibes like to call the what the fuck factor. And he's just so what the fuck.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to the story. So the two men, they constructed a bunker behind the cabin and eventually turned it into a dungeon of unimaginable horrors and nightmares. Leonard, in particular, seemed to derive pleasure from filming and asserting his power over his victims. The tapes revealed numerous kidnapped men and women, but the focus was the girls, who were tortured and sexually humiliated, oftentimes on film. Charles forced their male captives to watch the females being subjected to rape and abuse before quickly disposing of them. This is the part where it gets real dicey for me. Not that it wasn't before, but Leonard's wife, Cricket, featured on film, and it appeared she had at least some idea of the horrors taking place at the cabin. Many of the victims' assaults hastened the grisly deaths, and when they lost one victim, the duo always had another in their sights to imprison and torture, cold, calculating, and merciless. The two men would hold both male and female victims in the 6.5 by 3.5 foot cinder block bunker with only a bucket and toilet paper inside. The bunker was also lined with a one-way mirror. Not only were Lake and Ing's victims treated like less than prisoners, they also had a list of rules they had to abide by. The rules are as follows. 1. I must always be ready to service my master. I must be clean, brushed, and made up with my cell neat. 2. I must never speak unless spoken to, unless in bed. I must never look my master in the eye, but must keep my eyes downcast. 3. I must never show disrespect, either verbally or silent. I must never cross my arms or legs in front of my body or clench my fists, and unless eating, must always keep my lips parted. 4. I must be obedient completely and in all things. I must obey immediately and without question or comment. 5. I must always be quiet when locked in my cell. And 6. I must remember and obey any additional rules told to me. I must understand that any disappearance, any pain, trouble, or annoyance caused by me to my master will be grounds for punishment. So, and those were written rules, and then he would just make up other rules on top of that, and if they didn't remember them, they got punished. Between 1983 and 1985, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng kidnapped, tortured, raped, and murdered between 8 and 25 people, mostly women, in their bunker, perhaps in a bid to prepare for the impending nuclear holocaust when they would be required to repopulate the earth. The scope of their crimes is still undetermined, as is the total of their victims. Police remain unsure as to the team's true kill count, as they only found the remains of 12 people on their property and suspect there could be at least a dozen more. Among their positively identified victims were 2 local men named Robin Stapley and Paul Costner, a couple who lived up the street named Harvey and Deborah Dubbs, and multiple local children. Among Lake's belongings, police found videotapes of the men torturing and raping their victims. In some cases, husbands of victims were made to watch their wives being sexually assaulted before they were both killed. One of their victims, Deborah or Debbie Dubbs, was so violently sexually assaulted on tape that she could not have survived the ordeal. The men hogtied various women, forced them into oral sex and orgies, and put in leg irons. The sex captives were aged anywhere between 12 and 20 something. Only 6 of the women featured in the home movies were later found alive. 15 of them remain missing.
So, as young as 12.
According to a former cellmate of Charles Ng, the serial killer once bragged about sexually torturing and disfiguring women with a power drill and pliers. The pliers were used to rip off nipples, inserted a power drill attachment up vaginas, shoved rods up anuses, and broke knuckles with vice grips. The men seemed to have no particular type. I know. So Charles Ng seemed to be more of like
just clamping your
Charles
knuckles.
Ng seemed to be more of like torture part. Like obviously like rape is torture, but he was the one that was like he used like tools and drills and like broke bones and like ripped off nipples, cut off boobs. Ugh. So the men seem to have no particular type besides their affinity for torturing women, as they were also known to have killed children and men. In at least 2 instances, they kidnapped and killed a family of 3, including neighbors Lonnie Bond and Deborah O'Connor, who had a 2-year-old son together. This next clip is very disturbing.
Hey, Joe. Hey, baby is going to be taken away. Yeah. I'm ready to be taken away. The family got indefinitely doesn't have a baby.
I'm not taking my baby.
But I'm going to take you that way.
I won't take that one now. That's my baby.
Brenda, you have a... Your baby is found asleep like a rock. You ready? You're going to like you. Would I like me to put it in writing? Dad, just take it. Whatever we tell.
So in one of the tapes, Leonard put on Brenda O'Connor's clothes and laughed as he said, quote, "You can cry like the rest of them, but it won't do any good. We are pretty cold-hearted." In unreleased portions of the video, Brenda's husband, young son, and a family friend were forced to watch as she was sexually assaulted. None of them were ever seen again after May of 1985. Brenda and her son's bodies were never recovered. Another one of their victims was 18-year-old Kathy Allen, who was forced to undress on film and threatened death if she didn't cater to their every sadistic desire.
Never arises in any circumstance whatsoever that leads me to think that they're even attempting to make me just immaterial to whether I agree or anyone else is.
The only common thread between the victims was apparently their vicinity, whether out of laziness, convenience, or some combination of the two. The men never looked far for a target. For those captured by Leonard and Charles, any hope of escaping the cabin alive was scarce. As stated before, the rampage of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng lasted only 2 years. In 1985, thanks to petty theft, the 2 killers were finally caught. In June of that year, while on a trip into downtown San Francisco, Ng attempted to shoplift a vice from a hardware store. the clerk caught him and held him back, threatening to call the police. Ng panicked and called Lake, who made his way down to the store in an attempt to pay for the vice and smooth the situation over.
Dumbass.
Unfortunately, by the time... I know. I think we had this conversation like the other day when I was over. You can be high, or you can like drive the speed, like when we're driving, like, and you happen to smoke first. I can be high and drive, or I can speed while I'm driving, but you cannot do both. Like, so like if you're gonna be like a killer and shit, like don't go steal shit, then you're gonna get caught. I mean, like, I'm glad you're getting caught, but you know what I'm saying?
One bad thing at a time, people.
I know. So, unfortunately, by the time Lake arrived, so had the police. Even more unfortunate was that they picked up on Lake's abnormal behavior pretty quickly. And instead of releasing Ng, they began to question Lake. Things went from bad to worse when Lake handed over a driver's license that bore no resemblance to him, and when it was discovered that the man in the license, Scott Stapley, had been missing for several months. Dun, dun, dun. Furthermore, police found a gun equipped with an illegal silencer in the trunk of Lake's car, which was registered to Phil Costner, another missing San Francisco resident. It just gets better and better. The car and the gun were enough to arrest Leonard Lake, not to mention the shoplifting Charles Ng. Following their arrests, the police searched the cabin dungeon and found several stolen vehicles, as well as some 40 pounds of crushed, burned human bone in an incinerator. Authorities also found, quote-unquote, treasure maps in the cabin that led them to buried 5-gallon buckets. One was filled with enough stolen identification papers, credit cards, and personal belongings to lead police to believe that Lake had killed at least 25 people.
Dang.
The other bucket was even more disturbing. Inside were dozens of pages from Lake's personal journals and videotapes featuring the rape and torture of 2 women. 12 people were positively identified from the remains found on the property, but experts believed there could have been upwards of 25. It seemed that Leonard Lake knew that there was no way he was ever getting out of prison. Before he'd been arrested, he'd sewn cyanide pills into the lining of his clothing. While in custody, he swallowed several of them, dying in prison before charges could be faced.
Coward.
Leonard's wife, Cricket, remained uncooperative until she was granted legal immunity. Though she walked free from any charges, prosecutors believed she knew of Leonard and Charles' crimes and possibly even aided in luring in the victims.
What a bit.
His accomplice, Charles Ng, fled to Canada, where he spent 4 years in Canadian prison for shoplifting and firearms charges. When he was extradited to the United States and faced trial for 11 counts of murder. In 1999, Charles Ng was sentenced to death by lethal injection. However, due to legal loopholes, he remains incarcerated with no set execution date and remains on death row in the San Quentin State Prison.
That's fucked.
They be fucking in San Quentin.
Like he's still alive?
Yep.
What?
Yep, he's still alive. Yeah, he's in San Quentin. And they be fucking in San Quentin.
Yeah.
Another Will Ferrell movie. Get Hard. Go watch that one if you haven't seen that.
Yes.
Between Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, the body count could be as high as 25. But we may never know the full truth of the inhumane crimes.
Can't believe he's still alive. He's just in death row.
Yeah.
On death row, my bad.
Yep. Because of some legal loophole, which... I tried looking into it and I didn't find like what it was. It just kept bringing me back to like the case.
That's dumb.
And like everything he did, I was like, I know that. I've already researched that. I want to know what the loophole was.
It's due to Michael's fancy financial footwork.
I know, right? Anyways, guys, so that is my case. We almost forgot to mention that we started this podcast 2 years ago.
Holy crap. That is right. It doesn't feel that long ago. It must have been all the breaks we took.
For real. But I mean, you got to hand it to us. We do always make a comeback.
Heyo, speaking of comebacks, don't forget to come back next week for your weekly dose of thick thighs and murder vibes. For now, we are getting out of here.
You can always hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, or by emailing us at thickthighsmurdervibes@gmail.com. Until next week, bye.
Bye.